everybody. Welcome back. I'm Susan Lindner, your host of the Innovation Storyteller Show, where we talk about how to use story to get other people on board with your big idea and hopefully get you the resources, the runway, and the recognition you deserve for your breakthrough idea. I'm really excited today to have as my guest someone who has been working in innovation and climate and tech for a long time, and hopefully give us some ideas on how to tell stories that stick to get people on board, even when they're skeptical, even when the data presented seems obvious and applicable, and yet accepting a new idea can still feel like the hardest thing for other people in the room to do. So please let me introduce you to David Schatsky, who is a tech-forward research and innovation executive, a leader of high-performing and Gen AI-enabled teams. He recently retired from Deloitte, which is where David and I met, where he played a pivotal role in designing, launching, and leading research programs that influence senior executives' approaches to emerging technology trends. And I think this has probably helped them identify and capitalize on new business opportunities that perhaps were not clear before. David has created and taught a highly rated online course in artificial intelligence that has so far attracted more than 140,000 learners. He's also co-developed and currently leads a research-based client service offering that generated 8-figure sales in its first year of operation. Envious for all of us innovators trying to get our big ideas off the ground. David, your current focus is AI and climate tech, and we're going to be talking about all of it today. Thank you so much for joining me on the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm having a good time already.
So David and I met when I was working on the storytelling side of Deloitte's new billion-dollar climate and sustainability consulting arm. And you were knee-deep in creating these sustainability and climate tech-related responses to the climate crisis that, frankly, so many of my guests have been talking about. And we're right on the precipice of UN Climate Week here in New York as well, a time when all of us are thinking a little bit more about climate sustainability and the solutions that we can create. And frankly, the skepticism and the folks with their arms crossed in front of them still going, are we still talking about this? So David, tell us a little bit how you got into this side of tech and climate. How did you begin this journey into innovation and climate?
I appreciate the question. So I have worked in the tech industry in and around it my whole career, and most often on the cutting edge, sort of the early introductions of new technologies that are going to end up being really transformative. So right out of college, for instance, I worked for a spin out of the artificial intelligence lab of MIT. It was an AI company way back then. And we had a lot of challenges communicating what this technology was for and what the company's technology would do to enable clients to take advantage of it. Fast forwarding a couple of decades, probably, maybe a little bit less, I worked at Jupiter Research, which was a research and advisory firm that helped clients understand what was going on in the internet and the digital business world, how consumers were behaving, how that behavior was changing, how to build websites and run them. So I led a e-commerce infrastructure research practice initially when I joined there, based on the knowledge I had developed building trading systems on Wall Street in some years before. And after we sold the Jupiter business, I built on what I learned about building, selling, and running research businesses, and created a research and advisory boutique focused on climate tech, and corporate sustainability. And we had a small boutique. It was me and some contractors that I had hired. And we did syndicated research, meaning we identified topics that were broadly appealing and sold hundreds of them to clients in every industry, and did some pretty high profile custom research projects as well. We were commissioned by an NGO, for instance, to do a paper that was submitted to the Securities and Exchange Commission, explaining the economics and the challenges and benefits of securing the conflict minerals supply chain and trying to be more responsible. Then I was approached by Deloitte, who had just launched a corporate innovation, the firm's first central corporate innovation group. And one of the pillars of this group, the way it was going to operate and add value in the firm, was to enable the firm's leaders to have a view about what was on the horizon. So not just what was in the current financial period, the current quarter, not how to sell what was already on the books and in this current storefront, but what might be on the horizon that the firm's leaders should be thinking about investing in, maybe developing new assets and offerings around. And so I was hired as a contractor to design how the firm could do this. What would a trend sensing capability look like, and how would it operate?
What year
Just
was
a fun
this,
assignment.
David?
This was 2012. 2012.
2012. So this is a unit that's designed to think about, to number one, harvest all of the ideas that were currently circulating, or it was to identify trends that we should be working on moving forward.
So the question of how to do it was open ended, right? The endpoint, though, the goal was, what are the trends that represent opportunities to the firm in the near term? And so harvesting, you mean like internal views within the firm, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So that's an input, but also looking out at the marketplace in a multidimensional way and what's happening there is another important input. So I designed a kind of an approach to do this that involved kind of tracking lots of metrics in different areas, and which I can talk about in more detail later, if you like, connecting the dots between them, developing some hypotheses about trend areas that might be promising, trying to test those hypotheses, filtering them also for what would be relevant to Deloitte. Was it in its wheelhouse? Is it something a professional services firm should be doing? Do we have brand permission to do it? That's those kinds of things. And so, yeah, so I came in to build that capability and to run it. And so that's what I spent my Deloitte career on. First, in kind of general, what are the trends out there, and then in some specific areas where the firm was making investments, like AI, like chain of digital assets, ultimately in climate and sustainability. Within those areas, what are the trends that the firm needs to be aware of so it can tailor its investments accordingly?
Wow. So moving that process along, was there friction or pushback on people trying to harness their innovation, or even feeling like outside trends were distracting from the block and tackle of getting the work done for current clients?
So that's a really insightful question. Distracting is something that we came up against sometimes, because you have a large firm, you have a set of partners who are selling certain kinds of services to certain kinds of clients, and the way they want the firm to talk to the marketplace about the stuff that they have to sell, basically, right? And if we surface a new opportunity, and the partnership is not up to date on it, or it represents an opportunity that we don't have assets in place to deliver on, then that's a distraction, right? And so, and any new idea presents a quandary about where the resources come from to actually act on that idea, and are there resources taken away from some other area as part of that?
Yeah, which is always a question, right? I mean, so often I hear from people on the show who say, I was flat out at 100% of my team. How can I even find another 20% to put on this project that might not even work? And in fact, make the rest of my team look bad for taking their foot off the accelerator on the stuff that I promised by the end of Q2, right? So how do I even begin to think about these things? What are some of the ways that you found to get people on board with shifting their priorities, their resources, and even the budget sometimes?
The budget is a magic instrument. So at Deloitte, the innovation team had a dedicated budget that it could use to make experiments more attractive, right? We had funds and we had people that could drive experiments for new areas. And what we needed to do was find willing partners, like literally Deloitte partners, who thought that they had a client who would be open to experimenting with us. And so it was kind of driven from insights about the market, supported with dedicated resources, and then necessarily kind of coupled to an actual real client that showed some at least preliminary interest in testing an idea with us. And that's how we got a number of experiments off the ground and turned some of them into businesses.
Mm-hmm. And is there a technique that you found that's helpful? Like, thinking about my listeners and their next big challenge to get somebody on board, are there techniques that you found that get people on board more easily with an innovative idea than others?
So at a place like Deloitte, because it's so big and it's so diverse in terms of the sectors that people work in, the technologies they deal with, the business problems that they address for clients. One of the important things is being an effective internal marketer. Who are the individuals who are most likely to be receptive to what you're trying to develop? You have to find a fit with your internal market to have productive conversations. That doesn't mean they'll go for it, but at least it gives you a starting point. You need, for instance, to understand the kinds of issues that their client might be grappling with and be able to show how they line up with the innovation that you have in question. For instance, one of the areas that we developed was an early application of AI before the whole large language model explosion that we've seen in the last 5 to 7 years, in which we had built the capacity to automatically read and analyze documents. And so
Mhm.
for a class of our clients had huge paperwork burden reviewing contracts with suppliers, for instance, looking for consistency, looking for errors, looking for risks. And so we validated that that was a kind of a big opportunity where clients were spending a lot of time and a lot of money. And we were able to do some pilots with clients to show that this task could be, after some investment in training, could largely be automated. And so that was a story where we went from kind of technology, understanding what it might be good for, to identifying client issue that was a pain point, to developing a technology-based service that we could deliver to clients.
Right. And so when you think about those challenges that came up at that time, and I mean, I'm just thinking about so much of climate tech, right? Things that so much skepticism that circulates about climate change in general, right? So just getting people on board with the concepts around climate, the technology that would sustain it, and so many failed opportunities, right? I mean, this is what innovation is about. There's lots of opportunities that don't work because we're iterating all the time. Do you find that people have like a reputational risk associated with pursuing climate tech solutions in general?
There's reputational risks on both sides, and the
Mhm.
skepticism. I think the word you used. There's sort of like a hierarchy of skepticism, right? There are the people who doubt climate change is happening. There's the people who doubt anything can be done with it. Maybe it's happening, but it can't be addressed by humans. We don't tend to deal with those too much. That's not our bailiwick, right? Then there's the kind of corporate leaders who recognize that there's an expectation. Either they have an organic desire to do something, or they recognize that their stakeholders have an expectation that they'll do something about it. But there might be skepticism about the efficacy of the solutions that they could embrace. What can my company do? Most of the emissions that are connected to my business are produced by my suppliers, and I can't control them, right? So those are some real barriers to getting people moving. And so there's been a lot of effort in the climate and sustainability world to highlight case studies where initiatives have worked, and to show that it's possible and probable. Either work by moving the needle in terms of corporate reputation in a positive way, and also moving the needle in terms of financial metrics as well that matter, like cutting costs or improving quality.
Right. But sometimes when we're in pilot stage, it's hard to even um, get people on board to say, I professionally don't know if I want to do this, right? That if this fails publicly, right, and I'm engaging in this, this is a challenge for me career wise. We hear this a lot on this is like, am I going to be the one to stick my neck out for this thing, both on the client side and internally in the suggestion side?
Yeah, that is a risk that's faced in some areas. I would say that I'd love your opinion on it too, Susan. But in the climate and sustainability world, that particular field has the benefit of being really intrinsically appealing to people. It is a calling for many. They see it as something that would add meaning to their work life, and it attracts people who might have been more neutral and more careerist, given the opportunity to innovate in some other dimension.
Yeah, that's true. There is a do-gooder feeling around climate tech. Tell us a little bit about those projects that you're super proud of that you got to the finish line with folks that you feel like really made a difference.
Yeah, so the core thing that I spent the last couple of years at Deloitte doing was helping to start up a new offering focused on climate tech. It was a climate tech advisory service. And what my team kind of surfaced in the preceding kind of months that we were looking at climate and sustainability was that there was a gap in terms of how professional services firms like Deloitte were able to support clients, because there is services around calculating your carbon footprint, reporting your emissions, and complying with regulations and so forth. But to actually cut emissions, you need technology in many places. And you may need carbon capture technology, you may need energy storage capability, maybe clean power generation or hydrogen or whatever. At the end of the day, you need new methods for producing aluminum or steel or whatever. And so all of these so-called climate technologies at the end of the day are what are going to be required to move the needle. And so I saw an opportunity to educate our clients about what was happening across climate tech. And we found, well, it's jumping ahead a little bit, but we found many clients were hungry for this information, either because they knew that they were at some point going to need to deploy some of these technologies in their own operations, or maybe encourage their suppliers to do so, or they saw an opportunity to innovate in themselves and to move into new markets in the climate tech domain that would thrive in the future kind of low carbon economy. So the key innovation in my mind was we created this new capability that was new in Deloitte, always challenging to do in a large firm, that provided advisory services on climate tech. We took this big unruly domain of climate tech, built a taxonomy to help explain it to clients. There's 6 major sectors, a couple of dozen technology categories. Below that, some 400 technologies that we're continuously tracking, and then several thousand initial innovators producing those technologies. And we use that to walk clients through the world out there, help them figure out which parts of this taxonomy would be relevant to them, and offered services around technology scouting and techno-economic analysis in some cases, matchmaking with innovators and so forth. And we created this from scratch to a business that was both complementary to our existing climate and sustainability work and also standing on its own.
Fascinating. I mean, because you're really building it from scratch. And I love the other piece of this, which is a good deal of open innovation, right? Which is looking outside of the four walls of our own organization to look and see what startups are doing, to look potentially and see what academics are doing, right? Part of that of figuring out how to create these solutions is also looking beyond our four walls. And sometimes we forget that we have that opportunity as innovators to look well beyond where we're stuck today.
Yeah, absolutely. It's critical. I mean, I think that's that's sort of the core of the methodology that my team has followed.
Mm.
We tasked people with certain kind of domains that they should focus on, and they should read widely in those domains, and we should brainstorm periodically as a team if they're seeing a pattern that seems interesting. We can vet and evaluate them. We can test them, and then we can develop more focused kind of research to sort of test whether there's really a trend there. And that is taking a new source of information outside the day-to-day of how the business is running that ultimately generates new ideas that we can choose to act on or not.
Yeah. So this is one other thing I just want to hit on for a moment is what's coming next. As innovators, we're tasked, as you were, with identifying trends and where things are going. How do we think about, and maybe for our audience, um, we're inundated, right? There's so much happening. How do we begin to filter signal from noise? How do we look at trends that are coming down the pike and saying, this is worthwhile, that's not, in terms of evaluation criteria? And how did you do that, David, in thinking about at Deloitte, you're presented, right? You have 440,000 employees. There are an endless number of iterations of folks outside of the organization. How do you filter the signal from the noise?
Yeah, it's a key question, and there's multiple parts to it. So for one thing, my work tended to focus on technology. The firm has a lot of other services that are not technology centric. There's tax consulting, right? There's auditing and so forth. But we've looked at the impact that technology is going to have on our clients and also how we run our business. And would you excuse me 1 second? I know we're recording, but I have a dog that is going to create problems. If I had to define we had to define a domain, even if it as broad as technology as a starting point, right? We also needed a charter regarding the time horizon of interest to us. So there are people who are known as futurists, who look far into the future. And generally, their goal is to try to explicate different possible futures and to use that as an input into strategy setting. And this could be really long-term, 10, 20 years. So that was not our focus. We were looking for opportunities that the firm could commercialize in the near term, 18 to 36 months. So
Mm,
that influenced our methodology as well, because we were looking for real signals of commercial momentum, early commercial momentum in new areas that would suggest that the firm had an opportunity to capitalize on that momentum. And so given all that, right, we tended to look at, like, let's call it a 360-degree view. We looked at the supply side of a technology. What new technologies did we notice? How many companies were in the market trying to develop and sell those technologies? How much investment was going into the area to support those companies, right? Then we looked at the demand side. Where was this stuff getting deployed? Were there any marquee big companies doing pilots around this technology? And we looked at the market potential. Was there any market forecasting done, so forth? And we try to look also at the business case for using this technology. Were there provable case studies in which a company that went through the effort of piloting a new technology could actually report that they achieved a business benefit? So when we started to piece these, and you don't necessarily get all that information from one source, right? Speaking to vendors themselves. And so when we could piece together enough of a case across all of these signals that it seemed like there might be something there, then we had a potentially investable idea that could then be shaped and maybe find a vendor partner to do something with, find a willing client, and kind of learn more by testing.
yeah. Right. And when in doubt, test, test, test. Right. That's right.
Absolutely,
So what are you working on
absolutely.
now, David?
So at the moment, I am kind of building on what I've been doing the last couple of years in climate tech and my background in research and trends analysis and market intelligence and so forth. I'm working with a number of startups in the climate tech space as a mentor, working with an accelerator here in New York and
You want to give a
helping.
shout out to your accelerator, David?
So not yet. I will. It's a little early still. But yeah, so to help these companies, as startups usually are, they're led by a tech founder generally. They have a cool technology. Maybe they were a PhD student who worked on this technology with a professor, and they're trying to turn it into a business and take it to market. So the way I can help them is to help them understand who their prospective customers are, what the demand is, what the competitive landscape might be, and so forth. And so there's an amazing array of innovations that are really kind of different from where I spent much of my early career in information technology. This stuff is all physics and chemistry, which is
Mm.
really stimulating.
Yep. We do get thrown back into that mindset, right? When we're working with startups, you're like, I have to scratch the back of my head to see where that's in the filing cabinet from when we studied those subjects back in the day.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to ask you the three questions I ask everyone who comes on the show. So let's begin. What is the greatest innovation of all time?
I should have been prepared for these, Susan. So the
They're
greatest innovation of all
called
time.
hot seat questions for a reason, David.
Yeah, the I think that I will say religion is the greatest of all time in the sense of great being large and powerful, not necessarily always beneficial, because religion is a spiritual technology that has completely transformed the world, and it has been incredibly durable. So that so which is not always the case with innovations. So
And it's also iterating constantly.
it is.
Yes. That's a fascinating answer as a religion major in college. So I could talk
Oh,
about that all day. What if you had the opportunity to join any innovation team in human history, which team would you have joined?
ah, the well, I don't know all of them. I don't think it would have been that fun to work for Thomas Edison. Honestly, it seemed like kind of a sweatshop there.
Yep.
Um, and
And he
I
took all
think,
your ideas and put his name on it, right? All of his
yeah,
innovators worked for him.
I think it would have been brutal, but really inspiring to work on the Mac at Apple. And
Mm,
I talked to what would he was an innovation manager. I forget exactly what his title was at Apple a couple of years ago about what it was like to work with some of the incredibly brilliant people who were there at the time. I asked him how he managed them. How do you manage these people who are way smarter than you, way more creative than you, and basically don't like to be told what to do? And he gave me an awesome answer, which I never forgot, which is just talk to them about problems that you have and say, we have this problem and I don't know how to solve it, and just let them go.
Mm,
And that is what he credited with giving rise to a lot of the innovative things that came out of that group.
it's fascinating. Apparently, the question among parents today is not what do you want to be when you grow up, but what problems do you think you'd like to solve? And it is part of the Silicon Valley ethos that has changed
Hmm.
how we think about growing up or not.
Hmm. Or not,
Um,
or not.
yeah. And my last question is, what's something that you wish would be innovated, something that drives you absolutely crazy that you wish someone would find a solution for, or something that you wish that you see an opportunity that would be amazing if it could just be fixed or if it could be brought into the world?
Oh my goodness, there's so many of them, and they're often at the intersection of, or they're often there's a role for technology, but they're often sociological or political in nature. So we have, like, healthcare is benefiting from so much technology. It's almost like we don't need to do anything to enhance technological innovation in healthcare. We need to innovate in the structure of the healthcare system,
Mm.
because there is just no restraint on the cost of it, and the costs are growing faster than the benefits that the healthcare system is delivering. And anybody who knows anything about the healthcare system knows that it's not really a marketplace. The discipline of markets can really produce some really good benefits. So I would love to see an innovation in the way that our healthcare system is organized, that keeps the best of the dynamic technological innovation toward better treatments and diagnosis, but also makes it accessible and keep the costs down.
Hear, hear from your lips to Marcus Welby's ears from up on high, bringing us these changes one day. Thank you so much for joining me on the show today, David. If people want to get in touch, where can they reach you?
They can find me on LinkedIn. There's only one David Schatsky there,
Oh,
and
good.
so that's probably the best place.
Fantastic. David Schatsky, thank you so much for being on the Innovation Storyteller Show today.
Thanks for having me, Susan. It's a real pleasure.